Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Before we start the stories tonight, I'd just like to remind you, if you do enjoy the narrations and the stories I'm doing, please feel free to hit the like button and throw a comment in there, as it really does help me in the YouTube algorithm. If you want to see this content continue, then please hit the subscribe button to keep up with new uploads when they're put on. Ring that bell icon. And now, without further ado, let's get into tonight's stories. Sleep paralysis. Before I start, you gotta know that I have a long history of multiple sleep paralysis ever since I was a child. I dare say multiple in a single night. I'm a 18-year-old male, and well, I moved out from my mother's home 2 years ago, and have been independent since then, and have been roommates with my uncle for a couple of months now, but that's a different story. Anyway, this is going to be a little bit awkward, given the fact that I was listening to scary stories while trying to fall back asleep after waking up at 5 a.m. the same date I'm writing this post, September 25th, 2018. While I was falling asleep with my headphones on, I started to realize I've woken up, but my body couldn't move. Now, it was weird for me, given the fact that I hadn't had any sleep paralysis recently for a long time, but I knew what I was going through. My vision started to blur, my head felt heavy, but I could still hear the voice coming out of my headphones narrating a story. The strangest thing is that I somehow managed to move my hand and tried to take off my earbuds. As much as I tried, I couldn't take them off. It's as if they were glued to my ears. I somehow managed to take them off, but here's where it got freaky. I could still hear the voice, Unit 522. I touched my ears and checked if there was anything there. Nothing. I couldn't feel the earbuds at all. I was weirded out, yelling at my uncle, calling his name to see if he could hear me, but there was no answer. Every time I tried to yell, my voice got weak. It's as if instead of yelling, I was whispering in a loud way. And that's when I started to see things like demons, deformed faces, just staring at me and evilly smiling. I can't explain how they looked, but they were flashing in the ceiling. Weird, right? Yeah, I know. As I was sort of freaking out, I literally did what any young kid would do and hid under my blanket. Not because I was very scared or frightened for my life, but to see if those faces would go away. Though they did, it doesn't end there. Here's where the most freaky and weird shit happened. As my vision started to clear and I was able to move more freely, it's when I realized I never even moved a muscle. The whole time I was going through sleep paralysis. Turns out I was hallucinating shit and imagining that I was actually moving and yelling. Like I've said, I've had experience with sleep paralysis for a long time, so I totally have experience on how to actually get out of it when it's a normal one, where you're just awake and can't move. Yeah, I know that's the whole point of one, but not all of them are about hallucinations and imagining. This was one of the few paralyses where I hallucinated and imagined things. Like I said, I haven't had one in a year, I could say. This is one of my most recent ones. I know it's probably not that scary, but for those who have experienced sleep paralysis, know how terrifying it could be, and it takes a strong mind and soul to get out of one, because you're literally struggling with yourself to be able to move and just to come back to reality. For those who never experience sleep paralysis in their life, I really hope you never do. My first sleep paralysis story. I don't remember exactly when this was. I'm pretty sure it was around March 2018. I was 12 years old and in the 7th grade. I often listened to and read scary stories online about things like sleep paralysis, but I never thought it would happen to me. So before I had woken up, I was having a strange dream. I was playing Counter-Strike, but it felt like I wasn't playing, and it was real. I was shooting some targets, then I blacked out for a second. I woke up on the main road that goes into my neighborhood, and saw that the road was gone. The houses on my street were very small, 2-story box houses. There were elderly people standing out from the houses, all reading a newspaper, and the sign at the front of my neighborhood only read Brook G, with the rest crumbling off. I then appeared at my morning bus stop for school, looking at my phone. Everything was normal until a bush that normally isn't there screamed at me. I remember clearly feeling as though this was normal, so I screamed back. We went back and forth until I woke up with the scream echoing in my ears. I was in my bed, looking against the wall, unable to move. I hadn't realized that I was experiencing sleep paralysis, but was still freaked out by that screaming to fall back asleep. I lay there, not hearing anything, for about 5 minutes. I then heard what sounded like heavy boots hitting the ground out in my living room, coming towards my bedroom area. Just so you know, outside my bedroom, there is a hallway. On the left is a bathroom. At the end is my parents' room. And at the end on the right is a door that goes to my living room. The footsteps grew closer, coming to the hallway and then my parents' room. At that moment, I remembered my dad was out of town on a business trip, so my mom, who was a nice, small lady, was defenseless. I heard the walking start up again and come towards my room. The door opened, and whatever was out there came in, walking to the side of my bed, and stared at me. I closed my eyes and began to pray. I'm not really religious, but it's the only thing I can think to do. After what felt like hours, I try to turn over to look and see if anyone is there. I roll over with my eyes still closed to appear to anyone that is there that I'm still sleeping. I open my eyes and begin to squint. The coast is clear. I crawl out of my bed slowly and look at the clock. 4:14 a.m. Dang, I got school tomorrow, I thought. I tiptoed over to my door and grabbed a decorative oar my mom put on the wall in my room and walked out into the hallway. Our living room door was open with the light on, which was not normal, especially when my dad's out of town. I checked the bathroom and peek around the corner of the door. Nobody. So I make a silent sprint into my mom's room, putting the oar down on the floor. I shake her awake, quietly whispering her name. Mama, I think there's someone in the house. I heard walking around outside of my room, and I began to tear up, realizing that this all may have been in my head, and I woke up my mom for nothing. It's all right. We can go check the house real quick. I grab the oar and go check the house with my mother. There was nobody in our house, so I go back to bed, relieved that we were safe and that none of that was real. I haven't had a sleep paralysis experience since, and I'm glad it wasn't worse. This story seems like nothing compared to some of the other stories about it that I've heard. I hope you enjoyed this one. Paranormal Ghost Story. Grandma Loves Me from the Other Side. I am a 25-year-old female. For the purpose of anonymity, I will refer to myself as Sabrina. I am from Romania. English is not my native language, but I shall try my best to make the story easy to be understood. My stories contain what you would call angels, spirits, demons, archangels, satanic people doing forbidden sessions of voodoo, and everything but for this particular story. I sort of believe this is not necessarily a bad encounter, or so I lie to myself sometimes. There are many stories that I would love to share with you. You can either decide to share them, I don't mind, but mainly I just wish to talk with someone who has went through what I did and can understand and empathize with it based on their own personal experiences. The one story that I can and will share with you for now, I need time to think if I'm ready to share the less fortunate experiences for now. I live in Romania. Our country has Orthodox religion, basically very similar to Christianity. We believe in God and Jesus Christ, with small certain similarities and differences. For example, I don't know if it's the same as Catholics do, but we keep the deceased for a night. We call it the sleeping duty or guard night. We do not take the body out of its house he or she has lived in for their entire life, in order to help the spirit find its way to heaven easier. The next 2 days, as we bury the body after 3 days, we take the body to the church where loved ones, but not relatives, to the deceased may come and pay respects to that person. After this process concluded, we bury the body at the cemetery, where the priest will chant prayers, helping the spirit of the deceased understand that he or she is no longer among the living, as Romanians are very spiritual people and believe in the afterlife, spirits, and even in bad spirits that linger in the world, unable to move on. Understanding this is important, as the story is pretty detailed itself. I had 5 grandparents, 3 grandmothers, and 2 grandfathers. My first grandfather, we shall call him Michael, died when I was 6 years old due to a heart attack in August 2007. He raised me, and his death marked my life ever since, because I couldn't grasp the significance of death. I would frequently dream about him, his messages, his signs. I would hear him in my dreams as he would guide me to be a good person and so on. But even then, as a child, I knew what a dream was and what was reality. His wife, whom we shall call Anna, was my adoptive grandmother, as my real by-blood grandmother, named Margaret, has died when my mom was 2 years old, due to an abortion. I'm not sure if she was trying to abort my mother or a third child, since my mother has a brother, and she was the second child. During the communist years, 1946 to 1989, Romania had a strict law regarding abortions, and women would abort the fetuses of their own in the privacy of their homes by themselves, as no medics would agree to help with the procedure due to fear of being sentenced to life in prison. She died of septicemia. My mother grew up without a mother until the age of 6 years old. Needless to say, I never met her or knew anything about Margaret, my blood grandmother. But this story is about my grandmother, my adoptive one, named Anna. She was a very spiritual, wise, and kind-hearted and intelligent woman. She never had children of her own. She adopted my mom and uncle. Their names aren't important for the story. My grandfather, Michael, was only dating my grandmother, but after my mother had met her on a family visit on her side in Iasi, Moldova, it's a town in Romania, they got married soon after. My grandfather was a military general, and raising 2 children of 6 years and 13 years was hard. How they decided to get married? Well, it was thanks to my mother, because as soon as she first saw Grandma Anna, she went straight to her at the age of 6, raised her both arms up at her, and asked in a jolly child voice, "Hi, my name is Christina. Would you like to be my mommy?" My grandmother burst into tears, picked her up, and immediately created a connection with my mother, whom she raised and loved as her own. It was not the same for my uncle, as he was 13 at that time and knew his own mother, Margaret, had died and why. He denounced her and made her life much, much harder. After raising my mom and uncle, my uncle had 2 children of his own, a boy and a girl. She raised the girl, and when the boy was born, she had a calcium crisis that made her faint and hit her head. She refused to raise my cousin afterwards, as she was afraid she would drop the baby while holding it. My uncle never forgave her for that, and hated her even more. When I was born, I was the light of their life, as she loved my mother from the moment they met, and my grandfather Michael adored my mother. Because I am a replica of my mother, same eyes, same face, same body shape, they immediately took me in and raised me, as my father worked 3 different jobs, and my mom was a pediatric nurse and worked in shifts. I loved growing up with her. Like I said, she was an extremely spiritual person. She loved to meditate. She would tell me about her dreams. She taught me how to decode them and what it meant. She told me about ghost encounters she had had in her life, and always told me not to fear any spirit that comes close to me in my life, because ghosts use us as beams of light, guiding them to God when they are confused. Yes, that was my grandmother Anna for you. She did this until I was 18 years old. We were very close, and I was living 5 minutes away from her, so I could visit her daily, sometimes still sleeping at her place. Her hobby was to read the future in some cards that she had owned. Not tarot cards, but normal cards with some inscriptions she had, such as Encounter with Mysterious Man, Beware Crying Child, Careful, Dangerous Woman. I can give you photos of the pack. It's just that the words are in Romanian, but I can translate them for you if you wish. Also, I would have to go to my parents' house, since I have moved from there and the card deck remains there. On the New Year morning of 2017, at 3:15 a.m., I called my Grandma Anna to wish her a Happy New Year, and to let her know how much I and my family loved her and appreciated her. I'd like to mention that Romanians rarely express their love by saying I love you to our mothers, fathers, and grandparents. We consider that you show your love by what you do in your life and how you respect them, rather than just saying the words. But that night, for the first time in 23 years, at that time in 2017, I felt the need to tell her that. I still don't know why. Her voice changed. You could hear her chuckle in soft, happy tears, as she would hear that and said she loves us all and forever will. Nothing seemed suspicious, as I am a very sensitive and emotional woman myself, so the night went on normally. She was at a party. I was with my fiancé at his house. The next day, on January 1st, I received a phone call from my father, who told me that Grandma Anna had died the previous night. I couldn't express in words how my heart simply left my body, as if my own existence stopped, refusing to acknowledge that she was dead. I rushed home. The police were there. The ambulance was there. They say she died of a heart attack due to the temperature change. Same as my grandfather, Michael, did 11 years before her by the same cause. Outside it was cold. Inside the house it was too hot. And as she was rushing to change her clothes, her heart couldn't handle the temperature change. Her body couldn't balance the heat in it, and she died. But what I found particularly weird is the time of death. I still had her last phone call, 3:15 a.m. The policeman and the ambulance staff analyzed her and declared her time of death was around midnight. They said there was no way I could have talked to her at 3:15 a.m., as for by that time the body would have already been in the rigor mortis stage. Who did I talk to? Because it was her phone number, it was her voice, and she seemed incredibly fine. Call it a sick joke, or just medical staff time of death error. Creepy. During her funeral, I decided to write her a goodbye letter, as I am very spiritual, and even though no one will read it, I like to consider she took the message I had for her in heaven to pass it down to my other grandmother, Margaret, and two grandfathers, Michael and Peter. I wrote in that letter that I do love her a lot, that I thank her for every sacrifice she has done for me, and that I wish to tell Margaret, the real grandmother, which I had never met because she died from an abortion long before I was born, that I love her too, although I have never met her. I put that letter in my grandmother's coffin, kissed her forehead, and watched her go on her last road. My mom knows about the letter. She yet has asked me about what I wrote in it. After her funeral, I get a phone call from my grandmother. Yes, from my Nana Anna. At first, I thought it was from my father, as he would still use her phone to let all our relatives from other countries know that she has died. So normally I answer the phone, and I hear something unimaginable, impossible, formidable. I hear my Nana Anna. I hear her voice clearly. I hear her laughing voice with intermittence and static occurring whenever she would pause. It was a soft, fading voice, but nothing scary, nothing fearful or intimidating. It made me feel like she was indeed there. But I will admit the whole situation did freak me out. She said to me, "Hello, dear. I called to let you know I passed the message and I love you too." I couldn't reply as the phone call hung up right after. It left me feeling so vulnerable, as I thought maybe someone was playing a sick joke. But it couldn't be that. I saw my Nana buried myself. I saw the coffin be sealed. I saw the letter existed inside the coffin until the very last second. No one took it out to read it. She had 3 sisters, but they were all dead, and none of them had her voice. None of them could have repeated her voice that perfectly. But the even scarier part comes after the first phone call. After another week, I remember it was during another day of Monday, right 1 week after the first phone call. My phone starts ringing again under the same number. I answer, already having forgotten about what has happened, and I hear an old lady, a voice I couldn't feel familiar. I did not know who the lady was. It was a pretty soft but strong voice. It felt like a relatively young woman, but inexperienced. I would have to say around 30 to 40 years or so. I would like to mention that this time I was in the same room with my father, who owned her phone still, and I received the call. Her phone is in front of me on the table, and not ringing. I open her phone as I speak on mine. Her phone had no battery, and it was dead closed. But I still get her phone call. I answer. I hear this weird lady, and she goes like this. Hello, sweetheart. You don't know me, but I do. I received your message, and I love you too. Then the phone call hangs up again. Needless to say, I started screaming and panicking so hard, my dad immediately went to the telephone service to find out who was playing pranks on us. They went through her profile, numbers dialed and received. My number was not in her agenda of calls. We decided to disable her number. Ever since then, we do not receive calls anymore, but I do go to the cemetery more often and talk to them. This year is the first year from her death, so we are sort of celebrating her memory. But for me, personally, I do not celebrate her memory, as I feel she is constantly, physically with me. I often have dreams of her. She would often visit me at night. I'm saying dreams because I feel like I am going insane if I ever conclude on these situations being something other than dreams. I guess I am trying to thank you for giving me the possibility to share this with you. If you want to share my story further, tell all the people out there who encountered ghosts or paranormal activity, I'm going to say what my grandmother Anna taught me all my life. Don't be afraid of them, as they are just confused, lost souls who see you as beams of light, helping them to find God. The way you feel about them will conclude in the way they react, and afterwards ends up scaring you.